Hey everyone, welcome to Behind the Couch. Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh here. Thanks for spending a Saturday afternoonsy with us before Easter tomorrow. I'm sure you guys are busy. I know I have a million things to do after this, so we appreciate your time. Okay, I wanted to lead off with this because I was sitting here scrolling on my phone, and as I do. So the Cecil Hotel, whoever owns the building or whomever, just completely painted the sides of it. So the old historic Hotel Cecil sign is not there anymore. It's just white walls, which is awful. And it's a historic sign. So the historians over from Esoteric are saying that it's an illegal whitewashing of the sign.
Yeah, that's illegal then. You can't do that.
So if you are horrified and outraged, you can go to the Office of Historic Resources for Los Angeles to complain. I'll put up a website, but basically planning.lacity.org. No, I'm sorry, planning.lacity.org/preservation-design/contact. But I'm sure there's an easier way to get on their website at City Planning and complain about it. So that's terrible. It's a landmark. They can't do that. I do not want to drive by and not see that sign anymore. It looks gross. It's just white.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that was a developer decision.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that the last group that bought it was not fully understanding that there were city rules about it's going to be a portion of it's going to be used for rehousing the homeless or the unhoused, and that's the kind of thing that entitled
developers
entitled developers do. We've got McMansions in our neighborhood that finally got shut down after knocking down historic buildings, and
it's like every week one of those was popping up in your neighborhood.
And now they're just gross.
Yeah, there has been a lot of work over there lately. I mean, they did a big sort of ribbon cutting as far as opening it up to having more unhoused people being housed there. But I have seen workers going in and out a lot as well. So it looks like stuff is finally going on at the Cecil, but it's terrible. You just can't do that. Come on.
There's a lot of potential there in that building, despite its, pretty checkered past. There's a lot of potential to make it something for everybody. It would be great for it to be part hotel, part housing for the unhoused, part, a hybrid rental. It's too bad that we don't have anything that's affordable for young people coming into the cities these days. There just isn't. I talk about how, when I was a performer living in Chicago, a huge metropolitan area, and then living in LA, you could pursue your craft and support yourself working, as a bartender or a waiter or something, and you could have a place of your own while you did that. That doesn't exist anymore. It just doesn't.
You can't live in the city. Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's crazy right now. So housing market and just big cities proper, it's tough, and you have so much
seems
development.
Like there'll be some big economic shifts coming down the pipe, some of it probably jarring, but in the long term good. But I think there's going to be a bit of a revolution, but that's far afield from what we're talking about today. Welcome everybody. We want to welcome a new Patreon member.
Yes.
Huge big welcome to Kathy H. Thank you so much. As I say ad nauseum, I am just blown away that people pitch in to help us produce this podcast. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
For being part of the family. It feels like a family.
And we've been able to, with that, purchase some really great swag that we're going to give back and give out at our events this summer. We have CrimeCon at the end of this month, so still doing that. Podcast Row, please come join us if you can, making all of our final arrangements for that. And then at the end of summer into the fall, we have probably 3 other events we're going to do. We have another one that looks really exciting. That's in the Pacific Northwest. There's a true crime festival happening up there. and out of some weird, strange, as Scott would say, confluence of events, I happen to know the producer of that. She's her wife was my receptionist and is like the loveliest person. Actually, Scott, they came and saw us talk at Pasadena Lit Fest that one year. They were there.
How cool.
So my friend
I didn't
Taylor
know.
and her
That's
wife.
okay. Now I see the connection. Now I get it. Okay.
So she has produced different conventions before and loves true crime. So this feels supernatural. Feels very natural for her to do something like this. So I know it's going to be good. And we would love to go and be able to talk about something there. So yeah, lots of stuff coming up, but we only have an hour. So let's get into our topic today, which, I mean, it was kind of random and I just sort of plugged it in here this week, but I think it is a nice little compliment to our last episode on psychogenic amnesia, in a roundabout way, perhaps, when we're sort of talking about like,
it's in the family.
Yeah, dissociation, fugue states, not remembering. There'll be some talk about the hippocampus that I'm going to refer to really quickly. So that stuff should sound familiar if you listen to our last episode. But really, this whole idea of talking about this trend of DID, dissociative identity disorder, on TikTok came from several different social media followers that we have, including most recently Mallory on Facebook. I hope she's getting to tune in for this because she was like, oh my God, you guys have to cover this. And it's been interesting because I was like, what are you guys talking about? So every time I'm like, please educate me. I don't even know what's happening.
That's funny because that's one of the few areas, because I'm not, we're planning for you to try and catch me up to speed on TikTok, but that was one of the few ones that I had gotten pulled into, were several people on TikTok coming forward, presenting with that they have an actual diagnosis of DID and sharing their shifts between alters. And something just, there's a lot of things that didn't feel right about it, not necessarily because of the diagnosis or anything, but just, we'll get into it, but it was really off-putting. So I'm glad that you chose that to bring that forward. I think that's important.
I think it's interesting to look at. I'll kind of give my thoughts at the end about, just what I think about this altogether. But I thought maybe let's kind of step back from that for a second and just talk a little bit about how we feel about sort of the mental health world colliding with social media world. And I think we see this in a couple of different ways. You see people who are experiencing a certain diagnosis or mental health disorder or obstacle or illness taking to social media as an outlet. But then you have the professionals on there too. Or do you? Who are these people? And are they professionals?
Right.
So I think as someone who's recently kind of dove into especially TikTok, you're getting a lot of mental health professionals or coaches. I think the majority of them are more along the line of coaches, life coaches. And they have their certain niches and they're giving you a little, 15-second, 30-second bite of information or tips. And it's done in the tiniest bite possible, right? So because that's what this platform is for. So it's like, here's your 4 tips for this, or here's 4 signs of this. It's
right,
like as watered down as you could possibly get. So what do we think about that? I mean, is that just from a professional or expert in air quotes point of view? Is that the platform to be doing it on? What do you think?
So let me play devil's advocate here for 1 second. One of the things that there's potential for great benefit in this particular use of it, a use of social media as a platform, is that we, as a culture, as a world, need to get to a place where we are willing to destigmatize the issue of mental illness and normalize the fact that nobody gets out of this existence without some sort of manifestation in your own life, in your own psyche, of a mental illness, whether it is transitory, like an adjustment disorder, a grief disorder because you've lost something very important to yourself, or that you are witnessing vicariously through a friend, a family member, or a loved one, their experience of mental illness. So having a legit conversation about destigmatizing that process, very important. But as they say on The Good Place, humans have a really great talent for taking something great and screwing it up.
Fucking it up.
And I think that what you're pointing out is that, that there are people that are in it for the likes, and they're in it for the social media exposure, and they're in it for the followers. So grabbing somebody with something pithy that's quick and if it's accurate, I don't have any problem with it, but there's a lot of stuff out there that's really, really not accurate.
Yeah, I agree. On one hand, social media is always going to be that double-edged sword for whatever topic we're talking about, whether it's kids, whether it's adults, whether it's, informative or not. But I would wholeheartedly agree with what you say. As long as there's not harm being caused to, or, to the self of the person who's on there, I really don't have a problem with any of it. But if there's a professional getting on there, I think they need to represent themselves appropriately. I think they need to be accurate in what they're saying and have the resources at the ready. And because there's going to be people who do know the truth, or do know the accuracy, or do know the research, you always have to remember there's somebody more well-versed out there than you. And some of those people are also taking to these platforms and calling people out. So super
Abby,
important.
I was just going to jump in and say that Abby made a really great comment here in the comments, is that she's like, I'm not saying that Kaczynski was right, but
I love that.
But humans can't handle the rapid growth of technology. And I think that, Abby, you really are saying something that's really integral to this conversation. And that is about, and it dovetails with what Shiloh is saying regarding experts. It's like, if you're going to be an expert, then, if you're Dr. Bunny, but your doctorate is in physical education, be careful about making statements about human behavior, because that's not your field of expertise. It's out of your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And I want to do the same thing for myself. And I have stepped outside my scope of practice as well, and been rightly, pushed
corrected.
back in, which I appreciate. I've been rightly corrected.
Yeah.
But I wanted to illustrate what you're talking about, Shiloh. For me, I have to confess that after something that you're aware of, and you've helped me process it over the last couple of years, I have to confess that after a big social group fallout, about a year and a half ago, I really went down a rabbit hole regarding narcissistic personality disorder. And part of it was a challenge to myself to make sure that I was understanding the most recent research on the disorder, the understanding of it, and the growth of narcissistic personality disorder in today's current world, because we do see a lot of expression of personality disorders during times of duress in our culture. So just to be out with it, there was a big kind of blow up in our social circle where we realized that this person that had been close to us for a very long time was not who we thought that they were, or they were becoming something else. And I felt duped. My personal experience was like, I fell for this. How could I have possibly not seen this coming? I'm a doctorate. I have a doctorate in psychology. I've worked with all sorts of like really severe disorders, but maybe I was too close. You can't see the forest for the trees.
Sure.
And then I had to really start looking at the context of the dynamics rather than just trying to shoehorn somebody in. And that was due to me going back into therapy. I was prompted to go back in and work with my clinician that I've known for a very long time, who is also a licensed clinician, educated as a psychologist, but did not license as a psychologist. So this is somebody that has all of that experience. but really stays in the clinical realm. And what he said to me, which I echoes in my head very strongly, is, you know, you're really good at this, but, you know, be careful about immediately diagnosing somebody.
Sure.
Let's look at the behaviors. Let's look at like the behaviors that people are exhibiting during difficult times of their lives, and realizing that sometimes people are just assholes, right?
Yes.
But I went down the rabbit hole and I found what you're talking about. It was a divorce attorney, a high conflict divorce attorney, not to be confused with our dear friend Virginia Gilbert,
No.
marriage and family therapist who is an expert on high conflict divorce. She got so much great feedback from being on our Get Vocal a couple of months ago. But this attorney specializes in high conflict divorce, and she really does these pithy YouTube videos about dealing with narcissists. And some of the tools are very, very helpful. But after a while, I came away from it going, we're blaming people. We're
Yep.
giving them a diagnosis when this is an example of them acting at their worst as a result of a number of different factors. And it just sort of leads us in the wrong direction to understanding where people are in their lives. So
Yeah.
I think that represents some of the worst of it.
Yeah,
in the
I do
long-form
too.
YouTube video.
Well, especially in and I think I know who you're talking about because I stumbled upon it too, but I noticed that, you know, as of course, a lot of the psych stuff started coming up for me when I got into watching TikTok, as the algorithm gets to know me a little bit more. But it seemed like there were so many mental health professionals really shitting on people with narcissistic personality disorder without giving any regard that, yes, these are people doing terrible things and their behaviors can be terrible, but not acknowledging that these people are ill also. You know, these people have a diagnosis that, you know, they were, this is why they are the way they are. And it got
came
very
out of trauma.
Right. Yes. Now that we know that, right? So it's like, it's great to give tips on how to build boundaries and how to deal with someone like this. But when you're getting really like petty and shitty about putting those people down, that just was feeling icky to me.
I think that it gets difficult. I mean, I can, because I've been there, you know, I myself have been there in that place of projecting my anger onto a very highly charged lightning rod, as it were.
Yeah.
But the idea that we have to look at it, that when someone is exhibiting these behaviors, including some very famous people in the world today, we have to look at it as like the reason that they do this is because of some sort of sense of trauma or experience of trauma or experience, especially in narcissistic personality disorder, since we're on that. You know, that doesn't come out of nowhere. That comes out of a real sense from very early in childhood that you do not measure up. You absolutely do not measure up to the others in your environment. And you, on an unconscious level, will do anything, including to feel like you are worthy. So you will create a false persona. And unfortunately, that persona can then cause a lot of damage for the next 7 decades of life. But remember, it all started from some kid being hurt, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to hear from people as far as just being consumers. And, you know, if you're just watching this, what you think about it. Abby, feel free if you are blown up the chat in a wonderful way. Thank you so much. If you want to grab a spot. Keishla, I see that you're on. Did you want to weigh in on this at all? We'd be happy to have you. I do want to say, feel free to unmic if you'd like to. I do want to say, you know, none of this is any replacement for therapy. You know, getting your information from social media in any way is certainly no replacement. I'm going to be pretty conservative on that and hold fast to that. I still think that some of the app therapy services are a little bizarre. You know, being able to text your therapist anytime, that is not good therapeutic relationship.
Not good.
So I'm still weirded out by those. And this feels like an even more, garbage version of that, going to social media for your therapy. But Abby said she'll jump on in a second. But Scott, you actually found a professional who's been starting to
Oh my God.
push back on some of these people with their wild, I don't know, advice.
Yeah, I want everybody to go look this psychologist up. Her name is Dr. Inna. And she is a Soviet Ukrainian psychologist here in the US, came to the US after getting her undergrad and master, I think her undergrad in the Ukraine, and then had some pretty horrific challenges in education and the system there because of her ethnicity and because of her background, because she was Jewish. She was not, it was very like a very lottery based system to go on for a doctorate. So she came here, and she's now a professor. She's in academics, but also practices. And she is taking on these dumbass TikTokers that say, not even like, I mean, look, I'm out there. Y'all who have listened to our episodes, I am the Mulder in this relationship. I'm always looking for a bigger picture and cosmic versions of consciousness and stuff. But there's a lot of people promoting actually harmfully incorrect stuff on TikTok about behavior and human relationships. And Dr. Inna has jumped in and started going, no, that's not it. And she can be quite savage sometimes, which of course, warms the cockles of this little heart. I'm telling you.
I love and this is my ode to our last episode, is there's one where this guy is like, we store our trauma and our anxiety in our hips. And she's like pointing to a picture of the brain. She's like, hips? Hips? Do you mean is that short for hippocampus? Because that certainly can't be short for amygdala.
And I think he may be a trainer.
Probably.
He may be a trainer or something. And and certainly
I've heard
having
that from
a lot
my
of
yoga
injuries.
Instructor.
There is a lot of stuff that the hips are the, part of the foundation of your entire body. And if they're locked up, that locks up your back. There's all sorts of things, but trauma being held in your hips, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So she's a bit of a savage, and I think I'm in love. So
she's great. She's great. Yeah. I love it.
So should I do the kind of a catch up on DID?
Yeah, let's do a quick review of DID. Of course, we talked about this many moons ago. I listened to our episode, re-listened to it today, and it's the episode where we have my daughter at the end pick a raffle winner, and she's, hi, I'm 6. It's so funny. She sounds like she's tiny little person.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'd be great.
So first thing, just this is me being picky. The term is dissociative.
Say it all together, everybody.
Don't say dissociative. It's dissociative identity disorder. And so we've got to, leave out that extra syllable. Sorry. So I guess the big question is, do people actually have multiple personalities? And basing, my statements on what the most recent research is the answer is yes and no. And one of the reasons for the decision by the psychiatric community to change the disorder's name from multiple personality disorder to dissociative disorder is that multiple personalities is a very misleading term. A person diagnosed with DID feels that they have within them 2 or more identities or entities or personality states, and each one of those states has its own way of perceiving, thinking, experiencing their environment and their life. So currently, and that's as of most recent research, the agreement on the diagnosis looks as if 2 or more of these states or entities take control of the person's behavior at any given time, then they can allow the diagnosis of DID. So the experience states or the alters or the personalities were previously called personalities, and they're trying to get away from that because it really doesn't accurately reflect the common definition of what we would understand to be a personality, which is a part of our psychological makeup. Our personality is our characteristic set of behaviors, thought processes, emotional patterns that evolve from biological and certainly from environmental factors as well. We don't currently, and I say we, like the psych community in the world, we don't have a global, generally agreed upon definition of personality because
Right.
it can vary from culture to culture. So most theories focus on human behavior, what motivates human behavior, and what motivates our interpersonal engagements with other people and the world around us. So, what are the common terms that the psychologists and or therapists that work in DID? What do they call this? They'll call it alternate personalities,
Okay.
alters, parts, states of consciousness, ego states, and identities. And that is even just as confusing because it doesn't really fit the idea of how we identify the word identity. So it's
True.
kind of creating its own definition within this diagnosis. So what is understood is that they are all manifestations of a single person, and there are several diagnoses that we use that all have an aspect of what we would call being separated from ourselves, from our waking identity or our knowledge of ourselves. It always takes me back to this very interesting thing. Marsha Linehan, really amazing researcher and on access to disorders, particularly borderline. She has worked with people who have DID or claim that they have DID. And she's very cut and dried. Like there is no, you don't mess around with Marsha at all.
You don't bullshit
And she's
her.
like, I'm not really concerned with how many alters you have. I'm not really concerned with what their names are. Your legal name is this. This is who we're dealing with in the room today. She's very cut and dried, which I think is very helpful to think of in terms of providing a really tough but clear set of boundaries.
Yeah, I imagine that would be, having no experience or expertise in this area, I imagine that would be a really good way to address it for the clinicians' well-being, because this could be super overwhelming and just, you know, what a task ahead of you, right? So as well as what an unstable world this has got to be for individuals with this disorder. So the structure, the just giving them as little to focus on in a therapeutic setting rather than how the rest of their world probably runs wild, in a sense, sounds good.
Right.
I was also, so generally on TikTok, the most common term that I see is that they refer to them as alters, and that they talk about themselves as being a system. So like they are, if they have two or more one alter, you know, two or more quote unquote personalities, that they are then a system. And that's a lot of the verbiage that I've been hearing as well.
And is that language? Because I only in the recent or the Rolling Stone article, which is great. We'll put that up on our webpage for you guys. They refer to the Wonderland system. So what they're referring to, if I'm understanding you, is that's one person with DID who refers to themselves as the Wonderland system and has a number of alters within that system.
Right. But everyone else who's presenting on there, most of them talk about themselves as a system as well. And
is that term system generated by the population of individuals who feel they have DID at large, or is this actually an accepted clinical term?
Zero idea. I don't know. Okay. I hadn't heard it before this. So, hi, Abby.
Hey, Abby.
Hi. Okay.
Why are you outdoing us with your background?
I know. Look at me. I'm like so cool.
So professional.
I'm like, look, there's even colors. I can do colors. Wait, make it work. Blue,
oh my God, I'm jealous.
Orange. I have it on this thing so I don't lose it. And these
my God, look at that thing. You could whap someone with that.
Well, they're supposed to be. They're spank sticks from work.
I love it.
Hilarious. You're like, yeah, that's the
I
point.
also love your sound quality. Are you wearing a headset with a?
I am because I like I get like anxious about like bothering people, so like it keeps everybody sound out.
Yep.
So I don't have to bother anybody.
It's good.
But yeah.
Hey, so what are your thoughts about all the mental health stuff
So
on
many
social
things
media.
there. I mean, you guys know I reached out to you. God, it feels like a lifetime ago. About DID and such. And I don't know, screw it. So my ex, he has DID. Very, very much so untreated DID. And
but diagnosed at some point, or self-diagnosed?
I think so. Like, again, like, because we're all talking about, I mean, your episode talked about trauma and how it makes you block things out. I mean, there was even a memory that like was something I would always think of with him, and like it was like a month or so after I moved back to California, and I just couldn't remember the memory anymore. Like probably drinking a bottle of wine per boyfriend in my early 20s probably wasn't the best idea, and then like leaning into now. So
that was a theme.
Trauma's fun, but not as much. What was that?
Live and learn, he said.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's okay. There's only a dip in my head. It's fine. We'll make it through. But no, it's so funny. So I'm probably gonna work backwards. I've always called on YouTube. I learned that they are systems. Like one of them kind of compared it to she called the alters house headmates, which is kind of like shipmates, and then so it was like all like they're all up on their own, whatever. So I used to always call his alters headmates, because I think it's better than alters. I think alters is so like square. I don't know how else to say it other than that. So yeah. That was fun. I just got an email.
Can I ask you?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. Before you go on, can I ask you, how did you feel that kind of turning to like online content helped inform you? And did you at some point get a sense of like stuff that was bullshit or stuff that wasn't helpful?
Well, it's so funny because like before, like literally months before I met him, like within like a few months before that, there was a huge like drama with Trisha Paytas, who's Trisha Paytas, and pretty much she had dated somebody in her past that does actually have DID, and she had like claimed that she had it and faked it, and it was this whole thing. Like Trisha's faked just about anything and everything. So Edwin's generation had her on in an interview and was like, and kind of introduced me that way, and then also kind of back introduced me because there's another girl that's on there. I forget what her name is, but she's like one of the top DID like YouTubers on YouTube.
Is she the one that you said Anthony Padilla had interviewed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had watched like most of that interview. I think I watched a lot of it with my ex, because I was like, you need to watch this. Like I was trying to educate him, like you need to understand what's going on, because it's like like I got told in a crisis like what my diagnosis was. Nobody told me before. I was like, hey, what is wrong with me? Like
Yeah.
And so it's like if you slowly lean into it instead of just like having a crisis and learning that way. But yeah, no, I had actually started learning about it beforehand. I mean, you guys know I'm literally constantly always learning about this stuff.
Yep.
So it's like it was super fascinating. Yeah, so that's kind of my
So it seemed like it was you had vetted for what you thought was some pretty good information out there.
Yeah, I mean, I for the most part, like you guys were talking about the Marsha, she's actually, I think she's the same one that actually she's the female in Mindhunters. That's the same person.
Okay.
From what I understand. The person that did all those original multiple personalities interviews.
Oh, Marsha Linehan?
Yeah, I think they're all the same. I watched it.
Well,
they're not?
No, the woman in Mindhunter, crap, I don't have my...
She's based on a psychiatric nurse. She wasn't a psychologist, but she was a psychiatric nurse that was I mean, basically did most of the work, apparently. Like,
yeah, she was at University of Boston,
really
I think.
But Marsha Linehan is a psychologist who identifies as an individual with borderline personality disorder, and because of the challenges she had in her life, she was like, I've got to figure out what is going on, and she spent decades basically researching this particular personality disorder and developing one of the only evidence-based practices for it, which has been very successful.
Was that the one that they did on HBO? Because I might be
I
talking
don't
about that
know.
person.
I
I don't
don't
There's one
know.
on
know.
HBO. It
Maybe.
was oh so good. It was so good. I was like so excited about it. And then like it was of course still with my ex. Like they started going into like the DID and all that stuff, and I was like, how does this keep happening? But okay, we'll keep learning.
Oh, I
Yeah,
know which one you're talking about.
yeah, it
Like
was super
the many
interesting.
minds of whatever that guy's name is.
Yeah.
We
Well,
Oh,
need to cover
right.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
The guy in
yeah.
this from the 70s that
Yes.
was on trial.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Shortcross. Andrew Shortcross. Something like
I
that.
can't remember his name, but they do go back and they talk to all of those clinicians who are like still alive. The 70s was a very long
Oh,
time ago, you know,
Yeah, and
guys.
they're like
oh,
totally like
right.
she's not
Oh,
gonna find anything out, and then
Yeah.
it's just like, well, now that's like the newest thing, and like now you look dumb.
Yeah,
Give
that's a
women a
yeah.
break
There
every
was
once
a.
in a while. Not all women, but some women just give them mostly a break.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's really
Oh man.
interesting. I think we need to cover the rest of this material, but I think like if something else, please like add if you think of something else that
Well, I did want to, before you go, I did
yeah.
want to build on something that you said that I think is really very loving and compassionate and caring that you did. You're trying to help someone that you care about by being creative in your intervention. Sometimes wagging a
Mhm.
finger is not going to do anything, but like getting someone to sit in front of like an episode of intervention can make a big difference. You know, or
True.
getting them to watch a show that where they can go, oh wow, this does feel familiar. It's not always easy to accomplish that, but I think that was a great
Oh
intervention that you were
man.
coming up with. If, you
Yeah,
know,
that's
sometimes we
a.
have more success with it than other times, but
I mean,
keep up
yeah,
the
and
I
good
agree.
work.
that's totally bringing me back to the narcissist thing because my mother is a complicated individual, but for synonymous reasons and to what you guys were talking about, like trauma really does have a huge part in like that way of thinking, and it's unfortunate that like they work so hard or it's a survival mechanism from what I've
Mm.
learned and understand is like it's constantly going because they don't ever know how to slow down, and it's always being right because being wrong would like totally break their reality. And then it's just like it's the whole AA thing where it's like you got to admit you have a problem. Well, if you do that, you're going to break all of everything that
Yeah.
they have ever thought of.
Everything
That's a
crumbles.
great example. That is a great
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, it's oh man, it's been, I mean, I'm finally at a point with my mom. I'm just like I can't do it anymore. And, you know, when I first originally like had to cut it off slowly, I like sent some Psych2Go videos. I'm like, you should really check these out. And my therapist was like, she's never gonna think she's wrong, hun. Like don't try to like inform her that
Wasting your
way.
time.
And I now just clicked on like I don't know why I even like really tried because it's the same thing. Like you got to get help, and like it really took me getting out of Vegas to like be able to step back. And like he it wasn't even him that emailed me. It was his alter that emailed me from
Wow.
multiple accounts multiple times,
Mm.
and then his other alter texted me. Like it's just madness. Like, and
Wow.
it's one of those whole things like you can't help somebody who just want to help themselves. And life is
Well,
But
complicated and
look,
fun, so.
yeah.
I'm glad you're bringing
Yeah.
that up because I think that this is a good sort of a marker, a pin to put in for anybody listening to this, if it's in the next couple of weeks or it's 10 years from now, is that the miracle of healing relationships sometimes comes from the work that we do on ourselves to instill and hold boundaries. And boundaries are not only like the behaviors that you will not accept in other people that are harmful to you, but also boundaries with yourself of I am not going to personalize what is coming at me, these knives that are coming at me from my mom, my brother, my boss, my whatever. They can throw all the monkey shit at me that they want to. I don't have to take it. I don't have to pick it up. I don't
That
have
was
to
in a.
I can remove myself from it. And that is where the real healing comes from. When you are invulnerable to the triggering attempts that all these people make, then it can shift the relationship. So
Yeah, I mean,
there's some
yeah,
TikTok therapy for you.
yeah. I mean, that was a video that like literally just came up was like what people say about people's reactions to your boundaries shows you what they like respect they
Yes.
have for you essentially. I'm just
Absolutely.
like, all right. And the only person
Absolutely.
that can flip it and reverse it is Missy Elliott. All right. I walk out. Stop.
Well, and it
Mic
is
drop.
so true. Because your natural ability or desire would be like, but I want to help. I want to have this person see, right? And
and then you get homeless, and then you realize that you got to take care of yourself. So
there's that. You're too funny.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Got to do what you got to do. Now I work at a sex store, so it's fine. I'm great. Everything's great.
Right? That's all freedom.
Right. All right, y'all.
Awesome.
Do what you got to do. I'll be around.
Thank you for your feedback always.
Wonderful.
And yes, Keshla and Tori said the 24 Faces of Billy Milligan, and it's on Netflix.
That's it.
So that's one that I'm like,
that's
I
actually
gotta watch this again.
Yeah, it's a really good example. Like, it's funny because, like, I guess I can't have a lot of active random access memory RAM going on for all the shows that we watch.
I know.
But that particular show was incredibly revealing, as was the Ted Bundy tapes, of looking at mental health professionals from decades ago doing things that we would never do today, that we know from research is like, you're polluting the information stream that's coming from your client right now. Don't do that.
Yes.
And the Billy Milliken one was a great example of that.
So I'll give you guys a little hint of what might be to come for us. So Scott and I might be putting out more content than just 2 episodes a month for you soon. And so what we're thinking about, and would love your feedback, is that one of those each month would be us sort of examining a documentary in that way from our perspective, our just personal opinions, but also the mental health world and how that contributes to it. It would be less researchy, a little bit more fun, a little bit more of like, what you guys are watching, or we have a very big list of documentaries that we've never talked about. So
we're getting a lot of response in
yes,
the chat.
okay, people are on it
really well.
good.
Thank you guys.
We will continue to flesh that out. So
yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Do you want to talk about this, or should I get to the TikTok stuff with our last?
Just really quick, like to loop it back to our most recent episode, the idea that all of these things come within an umbrella or underneath an umbrella of dissociation, the psychogenic amnesia, dissociative fugue, the identity disorder. They're all responses to trauma, whether it's childhood. I mean, we do have evidence now that dissociative states can be as a result of people who have survived horrific wars. We don't see it so much in first responders, police officers, those people who can absolutely experience PTSD. But in people who vicariously witness things, and this is the other thing that I want to hear your thoughts on, Shiloh, is I get uncomfortable when the some of the youngsters, as I'll call it, are on TikTok talking about having this, and you're revealing a lot. You're basically saying, because there's only a couple of situations that DID emerges out of, and it is brutal childhood abuse. There's no organicity for it. There's no neurochemical basis for it, although neurochemicals can change as a result of trauma. But there was one girl that I saw today, and she said, I do this because it's an outlet for me, and it's her just sort of educating. There's none of this sort of gimmicky like, oh, you're catching me switch alters on film or anything like that. Okay.
But she says, this happened to me because I was tortured as a child. Like, she used that language. She didn't even use abuse. She said, I was tortured as a child. So when I hear a story or a TikTok, content like that, I tend to think like, okay, that lines up. Like, you're never going to be able to tell if it's real or not, no matter what the content is, right, from social media. But yeah, I'm certainly hearing people reveal that. She's not talking about the details of it, but there are people that say this comes out of this kind of trauma. But dissociation is a spectrum. Like, we're talking about the really extreme version and side of the spectrum. I think in our episode on this, we talked about like, if you're doing something like driving somewhere and you don't remember driving there because your mind was somewhere else, but you're on autopilot, that is like a very mild form of dissociating, right?
Absolutely.
There are people who experience trauma, like maybe first responders who are involved in a life-threatening situation where for that moment, there are what they call memory gaps. So there is some dissociation going on because of the fight or flight response that's happening and all that, you know, chemical imbalance that's going on. So there's a huge spectrum, but this most severe side that we're talking about, for sure, we're talking about really, really horrific trauma.
So before you go on, the one thing that I would add to that for anybody that is working towards doing, I want to share this so I can destigmatize and maybe I can help other people. I'm going to assume beneficence in my understanding of what their motivations are. Is I want people to be careful. Is that when you live in the world of social media and that is your bread and butter, or that's what you're pursuing to be part of your bread and butter, that in itself is an incredible stressor. And stress is the absolute instigator and enemy of stability. It is the enemy of stability in our mental and emotional health. So getting 400,000 people viewing you and then the trolling that comes along with it may not be the best environment you're creating for yourself. I just say that out of concern.
Yeah, I agree with you. So when the way that DID is presenting on TikTok specifically, because that's all the research that I did for this, you see a couple of different themes or ways that people are doing it. So one is sort of like a day in the life type videos, which there's a day in the life type videos for whomever. I follow this travel blogger that I know that I followed her forever. And she's a historian in Washington, DC. So she'll do like, this is what my day looks like, you know? But in these, whether it's real or not, you know, it's sort of moving through their day and the different alters just presenting, and they're editing it that way so that you're kind of hearing from all of them throughout the day, as well as just sort of some little like errands or whatever they're doing, cooking throughout the day, you know, being present with their kids or what have you. And then there's the ones that feel quite staged to me, where it's like, oh, I accidentally caught my switch between alters on camera. Those are a little hard. Yeah, like, oh, I'm gonna hit record on TikTok and start doing my thing, and then I start to dissociate, and all of a sudden I'm a new person. And I'm like, oh, you were recording. Oh, and then like the video ends. But there are people who also look as if they're intending to catch the switch on while they're recording, where they will even like put like a name tag on themselves with their what's the primary person called, like primary alter called, or personality?
I'm not
I can't
sure.
remember. Shit, there's a word for it. But they'll like put a name tag on them, and then they'll hit record, and then they dissociate, and then they sort of, you know, come to again as this other person. And then it's like that person person fronting. Yeah, the fronting person.
Okay.
That then realizes, oh, the person fronting was recording, and now I'm so-and-so. So that's what it kind of looks like, whether it's intentional or whether it's sort of like these accidental ones. And then there's the ones that I like, the woman that I was talking about, where she's just, it's an outlet for her. She's finding it therapeutic to also educate people and give a real life view of what it is, and talking a little bit about, you know, this stems from trauma. You know, there's aspects, alters that are mostly children. There's some that are adults. There's some that are protectors. And she even says, I was a kid when this happened. So it makes sense for the kid one. She's like, I have no idea why I have adult ones. I don't know enough about my diagnosis to even know that. So some of that, it feels genuine when they're not explaining everything away, if that makes sense. It's really hard to tell. And even Rolling Stone did an article and they interviewed a psychiatrist, and he's out of the University of Turkey, Dr. Vedat Sar. And he says, it's not impossible, I guess, to tell if someone's faking, and this is his area. But he goes on to say that people with DID who excessively publicize their condition and quote unquote socialize heavily as multiple alters represent only a minor subgroup of people with DID, of course. If you got on there and saw how popular this hashtag was, DID, you would think everyone has DID. So remember, the information is being skewed that way. This doctor also went on to say that this type of socialization and excessive publicization can lead to people believing that the DID patient in question is exaggerating or faking their condition, and also says that this backlash could be really detrimental to the person at the center of it. Quote, such socialization may turn to resistance to treatment and may keep the disorder more and more chronic. So what you were talking about, putting yourself out there and being on social media is now being disruptive to the mental illness that you're talking about, then what are we doing here? There's more harm being caused.
There's also, and so I want to come from a place of openness and understanding and willingness to not be an expert, because it's not my area of expertise. And so when I look at a video on YouTube or TikTok, and it's an individual who says, okay, here's a video of me, I caught myself shifting. You can tell because I blink. And here's a picture of that person watching TV, cross-legged position on their big fluffy couch in a hoodie watching TV. And then there's something that is imperceptible to me, and I'll watch it over and over and over again. And this is the person like, oh, did you see the shift there? And it leads, whether or not that particular experience is actually objectively occurring, or it's an internal subjective experience. I don't know how it's helpful to have that as a presentation to the world. And I think it gets very muddy in there. It gets very muddy in the 21st century cult of pseudo celebrity that so many people are pursuing now, including us. Like, it's very meta. Here we are. We're streaming a show right now, and we have a podcast, and so I mean, it's a very odd experiential dilemma. I think. I just want, if people are hurting and need support and help, and there's something to be gleaned from watching these things online, then that's great. But I think that the doctor that you quoted, the psychiatrist, is like, there's a lot of harm that can come from it, from people just sort of inadvertently and inaccurately describing these experiences that may or may not be what they think they are. Right.
And, whether or not it makes their diagnoses more complicated, or if it steers someone else away from getting the proper treatment, I think that could be problematic. There was this Rolling Stone article that looks at this, as well as some other articles that look at the popularity of DID on TikTok, talk about this one account where the person refers to themselves as Wonderland System. It's a now private account. So if you go looking for it, it's there, but it's private. And this was one that really kind of made this go viral. Essentially, this person presents with, I think, a total of 271 alters, and generally goes by Bunny, and has said that they are over 18. So each of their alters has, their own pronouns, styles, personalities, accents, mannerisms, all of that. I don't know if all 271 have made an appearance. But in January of this year, what happened is that this person started talking about some of their alters had very Republican political, right-leaning views, and the trolls came out and made life really, really miserable for this person. The bullying got really, really bad. So much, the videos and the account went viral because of that. But I mean, of course, then there were Reddit groups and subreddits, and TikTokers started doing parodies of this person. And then there were people putting together documentation and research and, spreadsheets of all the alters and what's the evidence. I mean, it was crazy how people just like globbed on to this one person and this one phenomenon and drove this person to go underground and their account to be private. But, just a really good example of that intersection of the mental health, social media, bullying, the whole phenomenon of just trolling in and of itself, which we've also been asked to do an episode on the psychology of people who are trolls. That's a really scary intersection to be in the middle of.
Yeah.
So, whether the diagnosis is real or not, it's still like, who needs all that? And I get it, with social media, people say, well, you put yourself out there, you're kind of opening yourself up to the world, but it doesn't mean people still get to be assholes, but they will.
Well, we would hope not. I mean, there certainly is like a whole fascinating set of motivations and behaviors that lead to one being a troll, including like the disinhibition of being behind, a keyboard, which is interesting because the exact opposite of someone is that of someone who is very comfortable putting themselves forward and being on camera and being on social media and being out there to be criticized.
Right.
And I don't like it's it's interesting. I could not find this clip. There's a Dr. Phil. I don't even know why I watch those clips because they infuriate me so much. There was a young woman here in Los Angeles, and the family didn't know what to do with her because she was, spending all their money and created this online, fashion thing.
Oh, she's like an influencer or trying to be an influencer.
She thinks she is. I mean, this is somebody that like, I'm really concerned for this person's safety and ability to function in the world. But there was, if there was some DID stuff going on that like, because I question it and I want to know more about the experience. I want to know more about the diagnosis. I want to know about the treatment of it from experts. But looking at it, I was like, oh, this looks like somebody who's DID. This looks like to me, and they're completely missing it. They keep coming at her for her behaviors, but they're not understanding what's there on the foundation about it.
It's interesting talking about getting meta. You'll have people on TikTok who say that they have DID diagnosis, who will then be calling out other people who say they have DID diagnoses and saying, this person, DID stems from trauma. This person has explicitly said, I have not experienced trauma in my life, but I'm diagnosed with DID. So they will start like,
and I can understand that because
if
somebody, if somebody is like trying to be, for want of a better term, and you and I use this term all the time, of gatekeepers, because people don't understand this, but in the mental health community, if you're working at the master's level or the doctorate level, it's like a version of the Hippocratic Oath. You have an ethical obligation to help keep a level of competence and ethics involved in your peers. And sometimes that might be having a conversation with someone and saying, you're not being professional in this way, and it's a problem, or you're actually doing something that's illegal, and that's a problem. And I mean, as much as I don't think that it's healthy for that kind of conflict back and forth, because it can be such a conflagration online when people start going at each other, that is something that we know. You might have something going on, but it's not DID if there's no trauma.
Yeah.
It's something else. It might be something else.
Yeah.
But they've got a point.
I found the ones interesting, again, where it didn't feel overly dramatic. It wasn't sensationalized. It was somebody saying, look, when I was in 7th grade, someone should have known something was going on because I was a good student. I walked in, teacher gave us this assignment, and then pulled me aside later and said, hey, you're the only one that didn't pass this assignment. What's going on? And she says, I literally don't remember doing this assignment. So, when they talk about things like that, I'm like, okay, that's a great example of how you could have dissociated. And actually, the one that I saw that was a similar example to that, she said that just prior to walking into the classroom, she saw a man on campus that looked very similar to her abuser. So, there was a trigger there. It was a very subtle,
perfect example.
Yeah, there was a very subtle dissociation that occurred. And, that was it. It wasn't anything more. That was like, take it as you want. And so I thought, what a lovely example for someone to try to understand this and wrap their head around. But I don't know. At the end of the day, I think I don't really care enough what people do on social media to have an opinion on all this. It's certainly fascinating when people want us to look at it through our lens. But it's, I am definitely going to follow Dr. Ina now, but
I am too. And maybe we can reach out to her. I think it would be fascinating. I love plain talkers like her. Yeah. I would say this. I agree with you as far as like, especially in this very narrow niche of DID, there's not a lot of control that we can have. We can just hope that people do better. But, as gatekeepers, whether you're a licensed professional or not, it's not appropriate for people for the likes or whatever, like a trainer. Look, if you're a trainer and you know about a tight psoas or a tight sciatic nerve, like, everything, then talk about that. Right. But don't make a blanket statement that trauma is held in the hips. Like, that's wackadoo. It's just wackadoo.
Right. Well said. Well said.
Don't lead people the wrong direction, and have some insight into what you know and what you don't know.
But it is the Wild West, right? Like, there's people can say whatever they want, and freedom of speech, all for it. But that's kind of the part that can drive you crazy. Like you were saying, we have to hold ourselves to ethical standards. And then someone who is not a licensed psychologist, but so they don't have those standards above them, they can do whatever the fuck they want because they're not held to those standards. And then we're like,
Well,
so when it is the Wild West, people do what they want.
I think that, I used to follow this, he's a podcaster and he used to have his own radio show. He's an author named Tom Hartman, and he's a brilliant commenter on politics, on economics. He's a great guy, very kind man. And he talks about one of the foundations of what our country is built on. Our country is built on that we have a social contract that is implied by all of our legal documents. That was one of the most progressive and creative ideas in the history of mankind. And it's the idea that it's based on survival. You have a social contract to interact with other people in a way that helps promote safety and the pursuit of happiness. And even though maybe this person is not licensed as a psychologist or mental health professionals, you're a better person and a better citizen if you have some insight and take responsibility for what you're putting out to the world. Yeah. I did want to say that Keishla had a great comment over here. Do you guys have any ethical concerns with professionals sharing certain information on social media that could be misunderstood? I think that's a great question. And I do. But the problem is that, if you're putting yourself out to an enormous audience of thousands to potentially millions of people, that is millions of iterations of how people can perceive what you're saying. So you can absolutely be very clear and didactic bullet point of what you're saying that is backed up by science. And there's always going to be a section of the population that's out there that will wildly misinterpret what you've said.
Yeah. And I think, you and I see that sometimes when we get a comment or an email with how someone has perceived what we have said, just in the podcast. And a lot of times, you and I have the conversation of like, well, something triggered this person. We don't know exactly what that is, nor is it worth engaging. And that's obviously when it's more of like the negative. when people are coming at us for stuff. But there's a responsibility with the information you put out into the world. Are you responsible for how people interpret that or perceive it or perhaps misunderstand it? I don't think you can be. Just have to be responsible for what you're putting out there. So yes, good question. Good question. Thank you, everyone. We're at the top of the hour, and happy Easter. If you celebrate Easter, if Passover was something you celebrated recently, well wishes to everyone. Just have a great weekend. Hopefully we'll see you in Vegas soon. So,
yes.
All right. Well, thanks, Scott. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Dr. Shiloh. Dr. Bunny. Bunny 1. Dr.
Okay.
Bunny 1.
Bye, Bunny 2.
Bye, everybody. Have a great week.